So the goal of this short presentation is to speak about the Italian case, because in many respects the Italian case represents an outlier, an exceptional case from a Western comparative perspective, as I will try to show in this presentation. No attacks, relatively low level of foreign fighters, and according to many indicators, a low level of jihadist radicalization, especially compared to other Western European countries. So I will try to show in a few minutes how this case could be interesting for other countries in terms of the evolution of the threat, and especially in terms of counter-terrorism responses. So in many respects, the Italian case is an exceptional case. We can speak about an Italian exceptionalism, at least so far, because on the one hand, we can point out some potentially worrisome elements associated with this national case. Very shortly, geographical proximity to conflict areas, porous borders, growing presence of migrants from Muslim majority countries and conflict areas. Most of them are irregular migrants. Most of them are at risk of marginalization in the country. Italian and Vatican are important symbolic objectives in jihadist propaganda, not only the Islamic State propaganda, and the role of Italy is quite active in the so-called Greater Middle East, including military involvement in some countries. Sometimes this involvement is not so visible, not so evident, but it is still present and important. Despite all these potentially worrisome elements, it's important to observe that Italy has not suffered lethal attacks on its territory, and generally speaking shows a limited level of radicalization. So why? I try to present some indication about the effectiveness of this Italian model to combat terrorism and radicalization. And maybe some of this indication could be useful for other countries, at least as kind of food for thought. So these are some of the most important references in jihadist propaganda about Italy and the Vatican from the big Rumia videos, etc. So obviously Italy as well has known this growth in terms of radicalization, including homegrown radicalization in the last few years, especially since the proclamation of the so-called caliphate in 2014. But overall, generally speaking, the Italian jihadist scene, including the homegrown jihadist scene, is generally speaking more contained, less structured, and less sophisticated. So I will try to focus on two very general, very simple indicators of the level of radicalization in countries such as Italy from a Western comparative perspective. So the number of attacks, according to our database compiled in partnership with GW, Italy is one of the very few large countries in the West without any attacks since the proclamation of the caliphate. So obviously we can compare the Italian case with the French case. There is obviously a huge difference, and generally speaking, France is not, or appears not to be, so hugely different from Italy in terms of social, cultural, political, general conditions. Another obvious indicator is the number of jihadist foreign fighters. In Italy, we have an official count of jihadist foreign fighters, not estimates, but an official count, an official list compiled and updated by the Italian Ministry of the Interior. And according to the latest available data, we have 141 foreign fighters. it's important to know that this list is based on quite extensive criteria. So, for example, less than 30 foreign fighters are Italian citizens of this 141, because the Italian authorities include in this list all the people with ties to Italy. Most of them are not Italian citizens. They are, for example, Italian residents. We know that there are different estimates for other countries. Just a simple graph according to this recent source, Cook and Vale, and you can know the difference between Italy and other important Western European countries such as France, Germany, Britain, Belgium, etc., in absolute terms. So in terms of the absolute number of foreign fighters, as we know, it's quite important to think about the relative terms, about the ratio between the number of jihadist foreign fighters and the general population. For example, per million people. So this is a simple graph about this ratio for some Western and Western European countries. So the position is Italy is quite interesting. We have a little more than 2 foreign fighters per million people, and for example, Belgium have more than 50 foreign fighters per million people. So with Lorenzo, last year we had the opportunity to study the individual profiles of all these people with information which was kindly supported by the Italian Ministry of the Interior, exclusive original information about all these individuals. At the time, they were 125, and we published a report on this work, which is available online. The title is Destination Jihad, Italy's Foreign Fighter, published by ICCT with GW. We had the opportunity to examine 28 individual profiles, variables, sorry. So not only gender, citizenship, place of residence, etc., but also, for example, criminal record, drug use, previous incarceration, psychological and psychiatric conditions, and even, for example, group affiliation in the conflict area and role in the conflict area. So, for reasons of time constraints, I will focus on, in this panel, on these 2 important variables, country of birth and citizenship. So it's quite interesting to note that, unlike many other Western European countries, the vast majority of Italy's foreign fighters were born abroad, especially in North Africa. Only 11 individuals were born in Italy. So once again, Italian foreign fighters in general, according to a general definition, they are not Italian citizens. And once again, unlike in many other Western European countries, most of these people do not have an Italian passport. So this is a simple graph about the country of birth in blue and the citizenship in gray. So it's clear that these people are not Italian in a strict sense. They are Moroccan, Tunisian, etc. So obviously there is a difference in the Italian case between the number of people who were born in Italy and with Italian passport, because there is obviously there are some situations of naturalizations, but generally speaking, the naturalization law in Italy is very restrictive. So, for example, in other countries, we could see much higher difference between the people who were abroad and have the nationality of that specific country, such as Scandinavian countries, for example. So, to conclude, from the threat to the response to terrorism, generally speaking, Italy has given priority to a hard counter-terrorism perspective. And many experts, many scholars think that this approach has proved itself to be effective. I think, and many other scholars and experts think that this is the main reason why Italy has this exceptional situation compared to other Western European countries. What are the reasons of this strong performance? Obviously, this is a complex question, but some reasons include the long history of confronting domestic terrorism, left-wing, right-wing, anarchist terrorism, organized crime, all these different types of mafia association, solid legal tools, for example, and I will speak about this in a while, administrative deportation of foreign citizens, a very good level of interagency cooperation, which is not so common, despite the fact that Italy has different law enforcement agencies. There is a very good level of interagency coordination and qualified personnel. So the last slide is about this important, according to many experts, including myself, measure that is quite peculiar for the Italian case, which is the measure of administrative deportation of foreign citizens. So in Italy, there is this very extensive use of administrative deportation of foreign citizens, in particular not European people who do not belong to the European Union, and with this very clear increase in the last few years, since 2015. So this measure is probably the cornerstone of the counter-terrorism approach in Italy, which in its turn is probably the main reason of this Italian exceptionalism. So in Italy it's possible, and it's quite frequent, to deport people without a trial, with the simple decree of the Minister of the Interior or the Prefect, without the collection of evidence before a court. And so it's possible to hit not only terrorists or people involved in terrorism, but also, and in particular, radicals. So it's possible to hit radicalization before any activity associated with terrorism. The measure is not without controversies, without controversial aspects, but it's very important, in my opinion, and the opinion of many scholars. Obviously, this measure is possible in Italy because there is this delay in terms of migration, because the most important migration flows started recently, only in the late 80s and the early 90s. So, for example, we don't have a large second generation in Italy, and we know that the second generation is, generally speaking, particularly vulnerable category of people. And obviously, as I said before, we have a very strict naturalization law. So it's not possible to have automatically the citizenship of Italy if you are not son of at least one Italian parent. So obviously this is another possibly controversial aspect, but for this measure, obviously the combination of this delay in terms of mass migration and this very strict naturalization law is very important. So, in conclusion, Italy actually represents an interesting, or at least quite interesting, worthwhile exception in the Western context. It remains to be seen if this exception will last for years, because obviously there are some indication of the fact that this Italian extremism, based on this Italian advantage, this particular model is diminishing. So it remains to be seen if this exception will last for other years, or if the country is getting closer to other Western European countries, because, for example, it's quite obvious that the number of second-generation individuals in the country is deemed to grow in the next few years. So, in conclusion, I think that maybe this national case can give some useful indication, maybe some useful suggestion for other countries, even if obviously it is based on specific conditions which are particular for this specific country. So, thank you.